Hello, all you beautiful souls. I wanted to talk today about trauma, being trauma informed, and consent. Have a little bit of a different take on some of these things. The first thing that I wanted to cover is I think that it's really great that people are waking up to how prevalent trauma is in our world, and none of us are going to handle it perfectly, because there is no perfect. We're all going to fumble a little bit sometimes, but there's a few things that I feel I want to shed my own light on, basically. And one of those is that there's a lot of talk about consent and having consent-based practice, and I think something that people often don't understand, it is beautiful. We want consent. Consent means that both parties, first of all, it means both parties are feeling good about the situation, right? It's not just the person that may or may not have trauma that they're healing from. It's both parties are feeling good about what's happening. So the first thing that I want to say is that if someone really truly has a lot of trauma, they are probably not going to be totally clear on what actually feels good to them in that situation. So, and some people with enough trauma, when you start getting into complex trauma, they're even programmed or trained, however you want to say that, to consent to things that don't feel good to them. So they're actually trained for the opposite of what you're asking for. So when we start getting into the realm of being trauma informed, I think this is a big piece that's missing for people who are calling themselves trauma informed or want to know more about being trauma informed. There's a big education missing around complex trauma in the realm of consent and the manipulation and coercion that happens to get people to participate in their own trauma, to the point where consent becomes contorted, and we may not even know in our own bodies what feels good and right anymore. And for people who experience a lot of sexual trauma, that gets extra confusing, because we have nerves, and we have nerve endings, and we have experiences like arousal and things like that that come up even when we're in a situation that we didn't consent to. So again, what feels good and what feels right becomes very confusing. So when you're someone that is wanting to be more trauma informed, and you're potentially even a little bit new to trauma, and you're asking for consent because that's what you've been told to do, right? You need to get consent from the person. You might want to start first with working with the person and finding out some things about their experience and feeling good, and what feels good to them. Do they know what feels good to them? Do they know what feels right? And I don't mean like right or wrong so much as like right and like, oh yeah, that feels right. That feels like truth. Do they have concepts of what things feel like for them as opposed to somebody else? Because we're also taught to appease, be people pleasers, right? So not only are there like the deeper levels of like programming that go on in these situations, but then we have the tendency to, what we learn is that if we can appease or please that perpetrator, then they're not going to hurt us as bad, or they're less likely to hurt us, or hopefully they don't hurt us as much, right? So we're doing this dance, right? And then you're asking that person whether or not they consent to something you're doing when you're working with them, right? Someone who has turned themselves inside out to to try to keep safe and to keep others appeased so that they can be more safe. You got to start with helping them understand what feels good to them, what feels safe to them. Because we shouldn't be asking for consent from someone who doesn't even know what's right for them, what's right for them to consent to. I can tell you in my own experience in my own trauma healing, there have been many times that I've consented to something in the moment and then looked back, sometime later, a couple days, couple hours even, and thought to myself, actually, I really didn't feel right or good about that, but I felt like I needed to say yes anyway. And I know this happens for a lot of people. We say yes anyway because that's what we've been trained to do. That's what we've been programmed to do. So we really kind of want to call that out to trauma informed when it comes to consent. And for everyone out there who wants to know more about being trauma informed and wants to know more about consent, starting with helping people to understand what feels good to them. And, starting with just, that means going really, really slow. That means that me as an individual, I need to go really, really slow in order to feel what the feeling might be. And whoever's working with me is going to need to go really slow so that they leave space for me to feel what might be true for me. When we have trauma, we have a tendency to want to move faster. We want to go through things harder, bulldoze through, right? That's a big tendency when we've had a lot of trauma. It can be. It's not the only tendency, but it often is. And for those people in particular who aren't sure what feels good, and you're asking for their consent, those are the people that need to go slower. Those are the people that first need to know what feels good. Those are the people that first need to know what feels right for them. So helping them by figuring that out is the best way that you can be trauma informed in that case. That's the best way that you can support that person that's experienced a lot of trauma, is helping them to get to a point where they're clear on what they think and they feel. Outside of all the programming, outside of all the perpetrators, outside of all the judgments and family members and everything that they've been through. Yeah, because if we're giving our verbal consent, but our body is tensed up like this, that's also something as somebody who's trauma informed, and you're holding space for that person, then you're going to need to be able to recognize that their words are saying yes, but their body is saying no. So verbal consent is not sufficient. It's not enough. You have to be able to track what's going on with the person on all levels. And during trauma, we often disconnect from our bodies. So encouraging that person, how does your body feel? What's going on in your body right now as I ask you that question? If I ask you if this feels good, if this feels right to you, how does your body feel? Because that may be easier for them to get in touch with, right? If they're trained to just say yes, then get them to touch in with their body. Is their body tense? Where's the tension? Are there words in the tension? Is there fear? Is there concern? What are the deeper levels that's bringing up for that person? All right, I hope that is helpful and supportive. I just want people to understand that consent is a nice word and it's a nice idea, and it is important, and that there may be some more groundwork to do before we get to that point with some people, some of us that have had deeper, bigger trauma, that have been trained basically against ourselves. Yeah, so I hope that is helpful, bring some deeper understanding for yourself or maybe for a loved one, or something that you want to pass on or share in some way. All right, feel free to hit subscribe if you like these videos and want to hear more of them. Notification bell to keep updated. And if you have any specific topics that you'd like me to cover, then go ahead and shoot me an email. Happy to do that. All right, lots of love and many blessings.